think that we are all here for the debating talk. Yeah, no one needs to switch rooms last minute. All right, and I don't think we're waiting for that many more people. So what we can do is just get started. I don't really have a specific thing to talk about today, so I would love to hear from you guys what topics you want to hear covered, and then we will see how we can go from there. Okay? So really, today's like super free and easy. Whatever you guys are interested in, we can talk about that. Also, just so you know, I've never seen like so many chalk varieties before. I'm very fascinated by this. Okay, so whenever you guys are ready to volunteer some topics, please do so, and then we can see how we can arrange them in a way that will flow well for everyone. Yeah? So what do people want to hear about? Actually, why don't I pause a second first? Most of you have, this is not your first tournament, right? Okay, so how many of you have been debating for a year already? At least a year? Okay, at least 2 years? Okay, 3 years? Okay, so mostly about the 1.5, 2 year mark for I think most of you, yeah? Cool. So that means that you guys are probably quite experienced with the basics of EP, so maybe today we can go a little more in-depth into some of those skills. Okay, so over to you guys. Oh, thank you.
Useful strategies for closing.
Closing, okay. Yes?
So it's a bit similar, but unlike extension, how to come up with
Extensions.
and also whip speech.
Extensions and whips, okay.
How to make speeches in a way that help you to win in your opponent who, for example, are EPL speaker who speak better.
Okay, yes?
It's kind of similar with what I just said, but what you should do when you have a really, really strong belief.
When you have a really strong, oh yeah, okay. Any other more topics that people are interested in chatting about?
Opening strategy, particularly on DPM.
DPM, okay.
Because the DPM do not have much chance to hear the opponent teams and how the meaning of existence of open government is shaded. I experienced the existence is shaded off by the closing government.
Okay, so how do you, okay, so from CG, how do you win against strong OGs? And from OG, how do you destroy closing? Yeah? Okay, opening strats.
How to come up with very initial POI.
POIs.
Preparation tips on PM.
PM. Wow, I feel like at this point we are really just going through all the speakers. Yeah? PM, extension whips, POIs. Okay, so does anyone have anything else to like throw up on the board?
Like the structure for the speakers.
Structure for the
Yeah,
speakers?
like the setup.
Set up, like,
Core definition, the structure, how it should.
sounds good. And sorry,
How do you use the prep time if you are closing?
prep time for closing. Cool.
Practice out of round.
No.
Practice out of round.
Practice out of rounds. Like, I'm so sorry, say that one more time.
Outside of round.
Outside of rounds, how do you practice like by yourself, is it? Okay. Cool. Okay, last chance. while I think about how to organize all of this. Okay, so my suggestion is that we just start talking about prep time for OG. And then from there, we can move on to closing, and then responses. POIs can be somewhere in the middle. And at any point, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to just raise your hand and ask them. I think that this would work a lot better for everyone if it was more interactive, rather than me standing here and telling you things. Because we all know there isn't one absolutely correct debate strategy. It of course changes round by round. So any questions at all would be super, super helpful, and I definitely welcome them. Okay. So let's talk about opening. Let's talk specifically about PM. Let me ask you guys, how many of you regularly speak PM with your partners? About 4 of you. Okay, wow, I see some infighting there. Okay, and how many of you speak PM because you really love PM rather than because your partner doesn't want to do it? And wow, 1-0. Okay, 1%, 2 people, kind of, 1.5 people. Okay, so I actually think PM is the best position you can have in a debate. The reason why I think it is the best position you can have in the debate is because you, as Prime Minister, set the stage for the entire round. And I'm saying this as a person who was always forced to do PM because her partner didn't like doing it, and I did that for 3 years. And that was when I realized that it's actually really useful because you had all of the time for your 7-minute speech, all of that is substantive material, and none of it has to include responses to other teams because no one has spoken before you. So you actually have a lot of leeway to play around in, and this is especially beneficial in a round or finals against very strong teams. Why is this the case? Well, first of all, because as PM, you get to do cool things like case setup. So we had a question about case setup earlier. How do you set a case as a Prime Minister? What do you usually have to include? The basic things will include things like definitions, okay, your policy, and something that I think is super important that often doesn't get enough attention, you need to have your framing. Okay, what do I mean by framing? Framing is, at its very basic level, setting the boundaries of the debate. Okay? A lot of your arguments will not make sense in abstract, meaning you will very rarely get a motion where you can run the exact same arguments you ran for a very similar round. All of your arguments need to be tailored to fit the context of the round, meaning you must talk about time, right? Are we talking about what's happening currently? Okay, so there's status quo, status quo. Are we talking about historical events? Are we talking about what's going to happen in the future, short run or long run? Okay. The second thing that you always need to consider is place. Okay. So some of you might be like, but why are we talking about time setting and place setting? You're not supposed to do that in a debate, right? Yeah, you're not supposed to do that in a debate, but all debates are stronger in certain contexts. Meaning that even though you can't say this debate is specifically about Norway in 1378, what you can say is this debate probably mostly takes place in these kinds of conditions. They mostly take place in these kinds of regions. What's going on in these regions? They mostly take place in these kinds of social contexts. What are these social contexts? They take place in a society that has developed from these kinds of historical contexts. What are these historical contexts? So I am going to now put a motion on the board and use that to kind of illustrate what I am talking about. National Debate Open last year, QDO last year. Okay, this course would encourage women to adopt masculine traits, for example, aggression or self-promotion. If you were PM, what are the things that you might need to consider for a round like this? You are PM, you have this motion. What are some of the factors you need to consider? Good. You have to talk about what this is. Great. What is this? What does this look like? What does this look like? Because even though emotion gives you examples, your examples are not a substitute for characterization. I think that is a trap I see a lot of teams fall into. They think that just because examples are given for them in the motion, they don't need to do any more work to develop those. So, the first thing you always need to do is say, what does this look like? What exactly are the characteristics that we are going to be encouraging or not encouraging? Now, the second question you're probably asking yourself is, why? Why do we do this? Now, this question of why can go in any number of directions, right? I think a lot of people immediately jump to things like, well, here is a list of benefits that we can get. What I think you need to do as PM is to slow down and take a step backwards and say, but how exactly do we know that these are the benefits that will come from this? What does the situation currently look like? The second question you need to ask is, why now? What is the situation? What is status quo? Because presumably, if it wants you to do something, if a motion asks you to do something, that means that it's something that's not currently done. And if it's not currently done, then what does the world look like without this thing? Right? So you always have to do, for policy motions, kind of a before and after. And to do an effective before and after, you must spend some time fully fleshing out what the before looks like. Meaning, you must spend a significant amount of time in your Prime Minister's speech describing the problem. What does the world look like right now? What exactly are the kinds of social norms that are being taught? What exactly is the opposite of this, right? What are the social norms? So, let's say you know what the social norms now are, and you've decided what the change is going to look like. Okay, you've decided that status quo means these kinds of norms. And instead of these kinds of norms, we want to shift them to a different kind of norm. Can one norm automatically replace the other? Why not? Say, I want to get from A to B. How do I get there? How do I get from one state in society to another state in society? Or to break that down even further, how, if I'm talking to someone who has a different view from me, how do I make them change their minds? Can I just say, this is what I want you to believe instead, and they will do it? So what happens in a discussion?
So someone needs to persuade the other person.
Someone needs to persuade the other
And
person.
in order to do that, it needs to use an effective strategy.
They need to use an effective strategy. So then your next question is, how? What exactly is your effective strategy? an effective strategy when you're doing something like trying to change society's life? Another?
Education.
Education. So how does education work? How does it change your life?
Education from school, education from parents, teaching me how to grow up.
Cool. So what if my parents tell me one thing and school tells me another thing? What happens? Which one wins? Does one automatically take over another? No, right? So what happens? If I'm hearing two conflicting ideas, maybe one person is telling me pineapple pizzas are the worst thing ever. Alright, then the other person is telling me, no, actually pineapple pizzas are delicious. Eh? Eh? What's going on here? Think about norms, think about how social change can be created. If one cannot automatically win over another, what happens when two of them meet? Okay?
I think first you need to make the society to change on culture, to make the parents in school that they can stand on the same language, same concept they're going to teach their children.
So you need to have the same base ideas or concepts, right? So you need to first agree on what good outcomes are. To give you a very simple example on this, if one person believes that health is the greatest possible outcome, and another person believes that wealth is the greatest possible outcome, you guys are talking at cross purposes. No matter how good your arguments are, if you cannot persuade them to believe in the ultimate aim of what you're trying to do, nothing else you really do matters. You need to first have a common understanding. The second thing, you need to look at what this interaction of norms looks like. By this I mean, if I want to promote something, my outcomes cannot be that this automatically, successfully happens. I always have to consider what are the things that are going to be blocking my outcome. Meaning, if I go out there and suddenly try and say, women, you should be really aggressive, are they all going to turn into really aggressive people overnight? No. So what is my most likely outcome? Nothing happens, 0% to 100% everyone's super aggressive. Maybe somewhere in between, pretty much. So something that you always have to consider is what is the most likely outcome? And to consider what the most likely outcome is, you need to look at how different groups in society perceive this. So first you look at different groups. Then you can consider things like how strong existing norms are versus how strong your new norm is. Alright, strength of norms. So if this is a very strong norm, then I can expect it to win over the weaker existing norms. But if this is a very weak norm, and social norms that currently exist are very, very strong, then can I expect to be effective? No, because your stronger norms are going to win out. So you need to do this kind of characterization about the relative strengths of these norms. Only when you are able to characterize how strong one norm is compared to another norm, can you then make arguments about how effective it is going to be. Does that make sense so far? Okay, so I'm going to pause here for a second and just open the floor to any questions or comments so far. Okay, so I'm going to pause. So all of these are things that should be running through your mind as a peer speaker. You need to simultaneously be thinking about what your outcome is going to be, how likely your outcome is going to be, what status quo looks like, and why it's bad. All of these things you need to be thinking about, and it needs to be right there in your setup.
How many minutes will you ideally take to come up with all these things? 15 minutes or like about 10 minutes and then use the rest of the time to do it?
So it really depends on what kind of strategy you and your partner have, right, for prep. I guess it also depends on how division of labor in your prep partnership works. So when I used to PM with my partner, what would happen is that he would brainstorm like substantive points, and I would focus on characterization and context building. So essentially, I would spend most of my prep time laying out the foundations of why is status quo bad? How strong are the norms in status quo? How effective is this likely to be? And then he would come up with points that were more outward focused, meaning what are the benefits of this, right? What are the various outcomes that can come from this? So if that's the case, I would say probably like very clear division of labor, each person spends like 5 minutes doing that, and then you reconvene in chat. I don't know how many of you have like near permanent partners you debate with, like people who you are very set on debating with for multiple tournaments. These kinds of arrangements are easier to form with people that you are used to working with, or else you have to spend a lot of time settling this. Okay. So these are all just like some of the things you are probably thinking about. This is all your characterization, your time, your place. Actually, no, we haven't done place, right? And we haven't really done time either. So let me just draw a few arrows to show you where the time stuff goes. What is status quo? What are the norms? Okay. Why have these norms developed? Okay. This is your time, your history. And then you also can ask yourself, where is this likely to take place? The reason you are asking yourself about how this norm developed and where it's likely to take place is because how effective something is actually depends strongly on what kinds of places this debate takes place in. So for example, this is probably going to be highly ineffective in a place like Saudi Arabia because of the relative strengths of norms there. It's likely to be more effective in a slightly more liberal place. Okay? So the thing is, and this is kind of weird, in fact, I'm just like kind of thinking out loud as I do this now, because this might not make sense. So if it doesn't make sense, just like ignore it, okay? But this is a thought I just had. You can even say that necessity and effectiveness are kind of on a direct continuum for each other in this particular instance. Because places in which this is the most necessary might also be the places where it is most ineffective, and vice versa. Places where it is the least necessary are also the places where it's likely to be the most effective, because the norms there converge the most. So this is also something you can keep in mind, maybe just a spare thought if you want to do some framing in a future round. Okay, so sorry it's very messy. A lot of this was just me thinking aloud as I went. I hope it is still at least somewhat helpful in talking about your framing. Note that this so far is all framing. We're not doing any definitional work, and we're not doing any policy work. So, sorry, I can't quite remember who asked the question about setup from first speaker. Okay, but was it kind of helpful? Okay, do you have any other like further concerns about setup from first speaker?
And there is
Is there any difference between the PM setup and the LO setup?
Is there any difference between the PM setup and the LO setup? It's a good question. So when you set up a speech from Prime Minister, what you're trying to do is to tighten the debate as much as possible, right? In a way that makes it effective on your side. So as a leader of opposition, you are probably fairly aware of what PM is likely to do, right? You look at a motion like this and you can tell yourself, well, PM is probably going to do X, Y, and Z. So you have two choices then as LO. Okay, and maybe we continue LO here. You have two choices as LO. The first is, do you play ball with OG setup? Do you agree with OG setup? Play along with OG. And the second question, if you don't want to play along with OG, can you counter-prop this? Is there some kind of alternative policy that you can use? Right? Counter-prop. How do you decide whether or not you want to counter-prop? You probably do a okay, never mind. You play along with OG if you think there are likely to be significant harms of them doing something, right? So, OG bad. OG ineffective. Now, these are two different things. OG can be ineffective, meaning they can do whatever they want, and like 0% change. Like the change is just nothing. So they're just wasting a lot of time and effort into doing nothing. Saying they are actively bad is saying, well, there are some harms that come about when you do this. Those harms might be societal, those harms might be individual, but either way, it's not just that they are failing to do good, it's that they are actively being bad. So if you feel like you have enough going on here, if you feel like you can win this case because you think OG's policy just leads to so many bad things happening, you don't really have to counter-prop because your whole case is strong enough as it is. When do you choose to counter-prop? Well, you can choose to counter-prop when you think you have a better way of getting to OG's benefits. It's the difference, right? You do this when OG has a clearly stated goal. OG wants, OG's ultimate good is social utility. And then you think to yourself, well, OG's ultimate goal is social utility, but this is actually like just kind of a very dumb way of going about it, and I have a better way of getting there. And if you really think you have a better way of getting there, you can have your counter policy. So these are the two strands that you kind of need to think of when you are in opposition. You need to think about, is my case strong enough if I run a case purely about why their case is bad? If it's strong enough and you think you could win doing that because OG is really just proposing a phenomenally stupid idea, go ahead. There is no need for you to have a counter-prop. But if you feel like there are harms, the harms that just aren't like big enough for you to build an entire case around it, it might be time for you to consider whether there's an alternative strategy you could use that doesn't fall prey to the same harms. So you are essentially building a positive case that aims to get to the same goals. In this case, would you counter-prop? Yes, why? if you have to counterprop this notion, forgot to add one more thing, sorry. Counterprop, you get OGs benefits all those, better than they do. OG's thing is inherently bad. Meaning, they are not bad because of some way it's going to be implemented. Meaning whatever they are teaching is just kind of intrinsically wrong. So you could argue, for instance, that no matter how effective it is, no matter how beneficial it is, no matter how socially good it might be to teach women to be more aggressive, aggression is in and of itself bad to promote. Do you see? So if you do all that, and if you want to run with that, you could also consider counterpropping. Say, maybe it's super effective, all right? Maybe it's super, super effective, but they're just promoting a bad thing, and it's just bad. Here are some ways you can get to the super, super effective outcome in other ways. Yeah. So that's another way of thinking about counterpropping. Cool. So I guess that's OG, like PM setup. I guess that's LO setup. Yes.
Would it be helpful to offer a specific example of a counterprop, or would you
For this
rather
one?
move on?
I don't know. Would it be helpful to offer a specific example of counterprop, or should we move on? I have no attachment to either side, to be quite honest. Perhaps your counterprop for this one could be promote care and promote an ethics of care to everyone. Why teach women to be more aggressive, teach everyone to be more caring?
Underlying that, I guess you might want to get rid of the whole notion of binaries, masculine, feminine.
Exactly, yes. So I guess this kind of goes on to a different question that you guys had, which was how do we collapse all this during prep time? What might be a useful way to structure your OG prep or your OO prep? The biggest advice I can give on this is that you don't want to dive in prep time immediately to small arguments. You notice what we did is not generate any arguments at all. We did like 0 argument generation for the past 20 minutes, right? All we did was hash out the context and the overall direction of the case. Why do I say this is the most important thing for you to do in opening? Because in opening, you are not just trying to win against your opponent by overwhelming them with the number of points you have. You are trying to win the debate. This means as long as you are confident that you have captured the main points of the debate, it actually doesn't matter how many subs you have. As long as you are able to set up your characterization really well, as long as you are able to set up your policy really well and defend it strongly, and as long as you are able to just have 2 or 3 points that prove everything you need to prove, you are probably going to win the debate because you have already taken the biggest points. And you cannot decide what the biggest points of the round are unless you already have a clear idea in your mind of what the round is about and where the round is going. Okay? So from opening, I would strongly encourage people to think of the big picture first before thinking of the substantives that you can run or the individual arguments. Get the big picture, the rest will come from there. Just focus on the big picture. It's always about what you need to prove to win. It's not about, I have 5 arguments, my partner has 3. is that enough for us to win? Because, to be quite frank, if you're running that many arguments, you're not going to cover them in depth anymore. Focus on building deep rather than scattershotting all your arguments. We can go a little bit more into prep time later. Right, I'm going to pause here because this is, I think, one chunk of the topics done. It's PM setup, LO setup. So the first two speakers. I'm going to pause here. Are there any questions we want to have about these two things before we move on to some other speakers? Not so much, right? So we will probably move on. Can I erase this? Yeah? Okay, actually we're all sick of this motion by now. So let's do a new one. So then I think someone had a question about what do deputies do? Okay, so what are some of the difficulties people have with being deputies? I'm asking because I think it's just more effective to involve you guys and be targeted towards your questions as opposed to just speaking generically about deputies. That's probably not super helpful. There are lots of things to do, yes. Like time management in the speech? Okay. Yeah, this is a particularly tricky issue to deal with because what you do as a deputy actually depends very much on how effective your first speaker was, right? So if your first speaker was particularly good in covering everything you had in prep very solidly, then your time management should shift to focus on attacking the other side, right? Because if your case was already very solidly built, you probably don't need to do that much more in terms of adding new material. So you can focus on defending. On the other hand, if your partner was particularly lax about covering the material you covered in prep, what should you as deputy do? Do you pivot to attack people, or do you try and case build? Okay, it's always a judgment call that you kind of have to do. So the first thing that you probably want to think about is and I should probably have said this earlier, but I forgot to because I was messy and disorganized. How much was in PM? Set up, okay, case, and pre-buttles. Okay, forgot to say this earlier, but it's actually quite important. You have a lot of time in the Prime Minister's speech to do quite a lot of work, and it's often quite beneficial for your team if you are able to pre-rebut some of the stronger arguments coming out from opposition. What do I mean by pre-rebut? I mean that at some point during your 15-minute prep, while your PM is writing their speech, it's not clear to me that deputy needs to be writing their speech also, because you don't even know what's going to happen in the debate. So what should deputy be doing? The first thing deputy should probably be doing is brainstorming what the other side's strongest material is, right? As deputy during prep, always brainstorm what the other side's strongest material is. Why are you thinking about the other side's strongest material? First of all, because it helps you. It helps you check if there are any big holes in the PM case that need to be filled. If you realize, for example, that the other side's strongest argument is something that your PM isn't dealing with at all, for some reason, it probably means that your case isn't very strong because you've missed out something crucial during prep. So this means that you can check the PM case and help strengthen. Strengthening it could just look like, PM, remember that you must say XYZ in your policy. Remember that you must do this in your speech. Or it could even be, please remember to say this. If the opposition wants to run this case, here is our response. Okay? So you could patch holes. Or add layers of pre-rebuttal. But sometimes you realize that your PM is really doing a lot of work already. Your PM is running 3 substantives, they're all pretty strong, and they've got a strong case set up. So what then do you as DPM do with all of this stuff that you have brainstormed? You can start considering possible responses. Why is it useful to do this during prep rather than otherwise? First of all, because later when you listen to their case, it's going to be really confusing for you to write your own new substantive, defend your partner's material while brainstorming new rebuttal. So this at least gives you a head start on what you think is the most important thing to tackle in the round, right? But second of all, it also gives you a bit of a chance to talk with your partner if necessary. If you realize that this is probably going to come up, and you realize you have not much idea how to deal with it, hopefully you have some time during prep to at least chat out possible scenarios with your partner. You might decide to reorient the DPM speech or even part of the PM speech to deal with whatever you have just identified. So this is all pre-round. The other thing you should be doing in the pre-round, so like during prep, is to talk to your PM. Offer your PM layers of analysis and then ask your PM, okay, what do you think you are not going to be able to cover? If they say nothing, then very good. Your PM is on their own. They will just do their speech and they will take all the material and they will run it well and everything will be fine. If they say, I don't think I have enough time to run this 4th substantive, then there is time for you to start developing the substantive they can't run, right? Develop things that PM is not running. So that's going to be your extension material. Now remember we said earlier that your PM is probably just going to run 2 or 3 solid points and do it incredibly well, right? Because that's how a PM wins things. You don't throw out 5 different points. You run 2 or 3 things very, very solidly. So as DPM, you're probably thinking, wait, does that mean my material is useless compared to PM's material? I don't know, is it? No, right? Because you still have a back half to worry about. So what are you thinking of in terms of DPM? You want to think in terms of, you want to think of additional angles. Meaning, is there perhaps a demographic group that we haven't thought about yet? how will this impact the old, the youth? How will this impact the low, mid, high socioeconomic status? How will this impact minority groups? What are all these different kinds of groups that we maybe are not developing in full? Can I expand on any one of these groups in my deputy speech? Can I talk about one of these groups in sufficient depth that closing will not be able to claim any benefits or harms to them? What else can you think about in terms of additional angles? You can think about different regions. How does this play out in the, maybe your PM is talking entirely about how this plays out in the developed world. Maybe you want to start thinking about how this plays out in less economically developed countries. Right? Maybe you want to think about how this plays out in different regions in the world, because your PM is just not going to be able to talk about everything. Additional angles, you could even think about what are some principles that we are trying to advance here. Just gonna write developed, developing. These are all some ways you can think about what you're doing with your time in terms of prepping for response to the other side and in terms of developing your own art. So this is all pre-speech. I'm going to move on to what happens during your speech. But before that, I think I'm going to pause and ask if anyone has any questions or concerns about deputy prep. Literally whenever, so just think of your hand if you have one. Okay, so deputy prep, think about additional things, pass things to your partner, and then during your speech itself, what are you doing in deputy? What is the role of a deputy? Just think back to all those boring judge and speaker briefings you sat through in your 2-3 years of debating. What is the role of a deputy? Refutation to the opposition team.
Comparison.
Comparison. Clarifying the case. What else? What else do you need? Reconstruction. Okay, so I am just going to say that all of these are things that a deputy should be doing, but the role of a deputy is to win at least the top half. Why do I say this? Because quite frankly, you can do your best and still have minimal control over what happens after you are done. But your job is to make sure that you are winning over at least one other team. And quite simply, if you are a deputy, by the end of your speech, you should have been able to tell me why OG beats OO or vice versa. Okay? Your role is to always make sure your case is winning over at least one other team. like minimally. Of course, your like full role is to make sure you win the debate, but you know, we'll go for at least the top half. Keeping that in mind, okay, this is how you should be organizing your speech. There is no fixed times breakdown for deputies. I can't tell you if you spend at least 2 minutes reconstructing, 2 minutes on rebuttal, and 3 minutes on a new substantive, you will win. Okay? Your job as deputy is to ask yourself, what is most likely going to make me win the top half? And then focus your energies on that. Right? You always need to keep the larger direction in mind. I think I keep emphasizing this, especially when I was talking about PM and LO. You always need to know what the winning strategy is. Okay, so and it's not a strategy that is going to guarantee you a win 100% of the time, because you will always have teams that are stronger or have better strategy, or maybe they just get lucky. With debate, you can't control all of that. What you can control is that you are running the strategy. It gives you the highest likelihood of winning. Meaning, if you are deputy against a very, very strong team who has advanced very, very strong arguments, but not really touched your PM speech, do you need to reconstruct? Just rebut, right? Just rebut and compare. If you are a deputy with a weak PM and a kind of weak opposition as well, that has nevertheless rebutted your weak PM, what do? You reconstruct your partner's case, and then you point out how weak their arguments were. If you are a deputy in a very, very messy debate, your PM messed up and no one knows what the policy is, your LO also messed up and now no one knows what the criteria is, what is your job? You lie, okay? You clarify, and you basically say, my partner very clearly said all of this, but your partner was not actually very clear at all, and you clarify everything. Okay? So that's really your job as deputy. You figure out strategically what's going on in the top half, what the judge is likely to be confused about, which issues the judge is likely to be weighing in their head. And once you figure that out, you base your speech around it. Okay? Is it a must to have a new substantive in deputy? It's not a must. Unless you feel like your deputy extension is going to be really significant in advancing your case, there is no need for one. Okay, so strong figure out your own strategies for these kinds of scenarios. We talked through some of them, but really it is up to the deputy to figure out their time split for all of these things. Okay? The last thing, no, I want to say 2 more things about deputy speeches, and then I'm going to move on. Oh, I feel like I should use a different color. I'm going to use a different color. You know, I'm really pleased to be here. When I was in America, we had chalkboards as well, except they were like really ugly chalkboards and also really old, and we only ever have white colored chalk. So this is the first time I'm using colored chalk, and I am like so pleased by it. It's so fun. I love it. Look at all those colors.
The bad thing is it sticks to your fingers.
It's so pretty though. I don't mind. I mean, white chalk sticks to your fingers too. It's just boring. Okay. So, 2 last things I want to emphasize in your deputy. How much time should you be spending on a substantive? If you run a substantive, how much time should you be spending on it? Take a guess. Okay, remember we said a substantive is not a must. But if you ran a substantive, how much time do you think you should spend on it? 2 to 3 minutes? Yeah, okay. I'm just going to say minimum 2 minutes. Why do I say minimum 2 minutes? Because there is almost no way I, as a judge, will watch a deputy speech and say, that 30 seconds and right at the end of the speech was the thing that really won it for me for OG. I feel like you need at least 2 minutes to develop a point properly. If it doesn't take 2 minutes to develop, I'm not really sure how important that point could possibly be. If you are running a point in deputy, you better make sure there is a point, there is a purpose to you running that point. And if there is a purpose to you running that point, meaning you are using it to advance your case and burn on CG, so there's a purpose to those points, you better make sure it's well developed. If you have a poorly developed point, that's actually kind of worse than not running it at all. Reason being, if you didn't run it, maybe CG wouldn't have thought of it. But now you ran it, and you ran it very badly. And CG's like, now I will run this properly. Goodbye, OG. Right? So run it properly, or don't run it at all, I think is my principle when it comes to deputy speeches. 2 minutes. Substantive. When do you place it in your speech? Is there a fixed time that you can say a substantive? At least not at the end, pretty much. Because I think I see a lot of people who get like really caught up in the rebuttal, and then they just run their substantive suddenly when they realize they're out of time. Usually that happens when the bell dings and they're like, 6 minutes, gotta start my substantive. And then they start a substantive, and it's really poorly developed. Okay? Something that I've seen a lot of debaters do, and something that I personally quite like doing, is having my substantive right at the start, and then just spending the rest of the time on rebuttals. If I know it's an important substantive, I'm going to get it out there first. So I know at least I have time to fully develop it, and then do all my rebuttals for the rest of the speech. It's possible. Play around with your strategy and figure out what works for you. Okay? And I know some people, like my debate partner used to do, he would pack the substantive like right around 5 minutes, where he figured that DLO would then be too busy writing rebuttals to listen to the substantive. And then we could be like, there was material in the DPM speech that was not dealt with. So as you can see, there are strategies to doing it both ways. If you pack it at the start, you know you won't run out of time, and you know it will be properly developed. But it's also more likely to be caught and dealt with. If you put it at the end, they might miss it, but it might also be poorly developed to the point where them missing it won't matter. So you must work out for yourselves what trade-offs you're okay with. Okay, then one last thing I want to talk about with this is so this is, I think we've just come out of like Asians and Austral season, right? And I actually just think that deputies in BP are way more fun and also way more strategic than deputies in Asians or Australs needs to be. Reason being, in Asians and Australs, you have a third speaker as well as a reply speaker that follows behind you. As a DPM, you are essentially extension and whip and reply all in one. So you must make sure, no matter where you end up putting your substantive, you must make sure you leave at least some time for your weighing. Your weighing is super, super important. Weighing can be very easily thought of as, here is why we win issues tell the judge this. Here is why we win these issues. And as a judge, I'm like, okay, cool, you won these issues. And then you must say, here is why these issues are important to you. As deputy, your job is to convince the judge that you won. So you must always tell them what you have won, which issues you have won, and then why those were the most important issues in the round to win. I'm going to say one last thing about deputies and weighing, and then I'm going to let everyone have a break because I feel like we've covered half the debate already, so that is an appropriate time for a break, yeah? Okay, so the last thing I want to say about weighing is, a recent trend I have noticed in various debate circuits is that people just say they are weighing, and then they don't actually do any weighing. Meaning that you must always have reasons why you are winning. You cannot just say, and on weighing these two issues, ours is more important. It's kind of like, but why? You know, so you must give me a reason. And the second thing is that weighing is easier to do after your rebuttal. Meaning, of course you can weigh your case versus their unrebutted case, but then they'll be like the same weight. So if you rebut their case and it becomes a lot smaller, it's a lot easier to outweigh it. Okay? So rebuttals are also a crucial part of weighing. Everything is interconnected. Okay, break. Okay, I will just sit here during break, and if people have questions that they don't want to ask in a big group, they can just talk to me as well. Okay, shall we say like 10 minutes? Yeah, 10 minutes? Okay. Sorry, I know that was like a lot, so definitely like take some water, have a nap. Yo, what's up?
So about the training part, like in practice, what are the language
So in practice, I like that. So what does the word look like? I say, this is how people normally behave because this is how the way they think. The way they think this is because of what society does, X, Y, Z. So it's all interconnected. And then I say, this is the world we want to get to, and you describe that world. Here is how these people behave. Here is how they think about everyone else. Here are the messages that society has. And then you get the questions that are going to be I normally do it right at the start of my speech because I think it's the thing that underlies a lot of the points. For example, if one of the points is that this is really bad, your output is really good, you can't really do that without having a separate part. But it's not true. If you want to like move it in, that's also okay. But I normally just say something like, before I start my points, I just want to like things to be included and like sort of like, okay, now this is the work we're doing. My first one is when you can like play around with it.
So I first talked about what this debate is about and now on this another way of
Exactly, it's another way of doing the framing. Here's what it's about, here's what it's not about.
차이가 모델 스피치 모델 PM 스피치 보고 SI
Well, we can do a different motion at the end. There's not, I feel like it's better than doing like one motion.
Framing or creating a solution because I tend to take too much room when I want to rebut their arguments, and even though I do not want to prove that the motion is more good or more bad, so where I tend to like that counter argument is just a counter.
If you're trying to rebut somebody's point, you don't have to repeat them. All you have to do is say, they said that this was going to be ineffective because of insert, which is really good. Just like if you're supposed to say that much, and then you take this one and then you spend more time to say one. right? Then make sure your partner is listening to you. Then you come up and say, my partner has already opened this, and this. What I am going to do now is show that even if we don't get this, there is by downside this activity. So always make it clear what you're comparing